Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Plans Committee on the Thursday, the 18th of December 2025. Sorry, it's a bit loud, for Charnwood Borough Council. Please could I ask everyone present to turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent. May I remind all those present that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel and that by attending the meeting you are giving your consent to being filmed. A notice with further information has been provided in the public gallery. Under the Openness of Local Government Bodies regulations, people may also film or record this meeting, and this is outside the Council's control. May I remind members of the public to be considerate of the committee and the officers throughout the meeting and to remain quiet unless speaking as part of the allocated public speaking slot. Any disruption outside the formal speaking arrangements, whether, for example, by speaking or applauding in reaction to contributions from officers, members of the committee or public speakers, is unacceptable and may lead to the adjournment of the meeting and members of the public being asked to leave. For the benefit of those watching the live stream and members of the public here this evening, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Lenny, Chair of the Planning Committee, and other members joining us on the Plans Committee this evening are Councillor Corey Lowesley, who's my Vice Chair, Councillor Fryer, Councillor Infield, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Smidovics and Councillor Taylor-Durrant. The planning officers present this evening are Ms Stone and Ms Liggins and Ms Garbett. Our lead officer this evening is Mr Upton and our Democratic Services officer is Miss Dobson, sitting over there. And I would also like to welcome Mr Evans, who is our legal advisor for the evening. For those watching the live stream, the Planning Officer presentation has been published on the website for those who wish to view it and can be found on the agenda page for the Plans Committee for the 18th of December 2025. Could I ask that members of the committee use their microphones every time they speak to ensure that the viewers of the live stream and recording can hear the discussion. Speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time and will have 3 minutes to speak. When 1 minute of time is remaining, they will be advised by the Democratic Services Officer, Miss Dobson. This evening, we have a request from Councillor Snart, who is due to be speaking on item 5B, item P/24/1673/2, land at Mapplewell Road, Woodhouse Eaves, for the committee to consider this item first, as he has been invited to attend the Mayor's Christmas Carol service this evening, and as a former Mayor, he would like to attend that service. I would therefore like to propose that we consider this item as the first one on the agenda tonight. And I need a proposer and a seconder to be able to do that. Can you put your microphone?
I'll propose that we accept item 2 to be moved up to item 1.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favour? Keep your hand up because we have to count everything properly now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you. So everyone's agreed. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is apologies. Ms Dobson, have we received any apologies?
I confirm we've received apologies from Councillor Good and Councillor Roberts will be substitute.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meetings Is the committee happy to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meetings held on the 13th of November and the 25th of November? Please raise your hands. All those that were there anyway.
3, 4, 5, 6. 6.
6. Any?
7.
All right. Are the other members abstaining because they weren't at that one or two of those meetings?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 3 is questions under committee procedure 12.8. Ms Dobson, do we have or have we received any questions?
I confirm we've not received any questions.
Okay. Item 4 is disclosures of pecuniary and personal interest. Ms Dobson, have we received any disclosures of interest?
I've received a disclosure of interest from Councillor Corey Lowesley, who's called in application P240077/2, Frederick Street, Loughborough, and will be speaking on the item, and he will therefore move to the public gallery and not take part in the discussion. Councillors Fryer and Corey Lowesley have disclosed that they have received an email from the applicant regarding item 5B, P241673/2, land at Maplewell Road, Woodhouse Eaves. Councillor Corey Lowesley has also declared that he knows a number of objectors to the application. Both councillors, however, come to the meeting with an open mind. Could I ask if there are any other members of the committee who've received the email from the applicant? I'll take the names. So Councillor Infield, Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Taylor-Durant. And can you confirm that you come to the meeting with an open mind, please? Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we're now moving on to item 5, which is the planning applications. First of all, we will be considering item which was originally going to be 2. So I've got to flick around with my bits and bobs now. Yeah. So it's item 5B on the original papers, which is number P/24/1673/2, land at Maplewell Road, Woodhouse Eaves. I'd like to refer to our planning officer, Miss Liggins.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd just like to draw your attention to the extras report for this item, which details representations and information received since the report was published. In addition, it's recommended that an additional planning condition be considered by members to relate to the implementation of the submitted very detailed landscaping plan. The implementation of that, which is plan number GL2329CP01D, which was received on the 16th of July 2025. So the application relates to land to the west of Maplewell Road. Members may recall that the site was the subject of an outline planning application, which was granted on appeal under application P/20/2107. The current application is for the approval of the reserved matters stemming from that appeal proposal and relates to the erection of 36 new homes. The outline application considered the means of access, and these details are therefore already approved. The outline planning application was also accompanied by a completed Section 106 agreement relating to developer contributions as set out in paragraphs 3.6 and 9.12.3 of the officer report. The application is reported to Plans Committee at the request of Councillor Snart for the reasons published in paragraph 1.1. So this is the plan of the site, which is part of 2 parallel fields which front onto Maplewell Road. This is an aerial photograph showing the two fields in the centre. Approximately the front half of each field forms the totality of the proposed housing development, which amounts to around 0.5 hectare. That's shown in red on the previous slide. The land rises to the west such that there's a levels change of approximately 12 metres between the highest westernmost point and the lowest easternmost point. The site's bounded to the north by residential development within Woodhouse Eaves, limits to development, and the application site is therefore outside those limits and is countryside. The site is not within the conservation area and there is no statutory listed buildings nearby. Number 155 Maplewell Road opposite the southern field is locally listed. This slide shows the photo of the site taken from Maplewell Road looking across the site from the south. The property to the right-hand side that you can see the roof of is number 155 Maplewell Road, which is the locally listed building I just mentioned. This photo is taken from the corner of number 124 Maplewell Road and looking up into the site. You can see the private drive leading to number 128 to the rear of that property, the backland bungalow. You'll notice the two fields which form the application site are divided by a hedge which is to be removed, and there are trees dotted within the fields, with several of these also being removed. The application is accompanied by a comprehensive landscaping scheme which clearly indicates which are to be removed and which are to be retained, together with significant new tree and other planting proposals. This slide shows the site frontage looking southwards up the hill of Maplewell Road. You'll notice the native hedgerow across the site frontage, which is to be retained except where paths to the front doors of new houses would be punctuated. This slide shows the proposed layout as received on 27th of November. This shows the development of 36 homes accessed off a single road with private drives and rear parking areas. A second access is shown on the outline planning application, goes into the public open space area within the yellow easement band to the north of the built development. The layout is derived from a stepped topology in order that retaining walls can feature between the different ground levels within the site. The dwellings shown in turquoise are the dwellings to be affordable rented homes, and those in green are the affordable homes for shared ownership. The site edged blue to the west is land retained in the ownership of the developer, which is to be planted as amenity space for biodiversity and landscape value, and there would be no public access to this area. And the scheme presents a series of terraced and semi-detached units fronting a near continuous built frontage onto Maplewell Road, with small front gardens, 1 to 3 metres in depth. Dwellings to the rear are detached, semi-detached or terrace properties and will be set on a series of levels with those retaining walls. This slide shows an artist's impression of the Maplewell Road frontage with the access road leading into the development between the houses. The photo to the right is of existing dwellings next door to the application site, which are 166 to 178 Maplewell Road, and you can see the design similarities to those proposed. This slide shows a range of typical house types. I've not included them all, but that's a sample of various designs and materials proposed throughout the development. So these are the key considerations relevant to the determination of the application, and each one is addressed in detail in the officer report from section 9 onwards. There's lots to go through, but I'll try to be brief. The principle and quantum of residential development at this site is established through the grant of the outline planning permission. Since that allowed appeal decision, the Woodhouse Parish Neighbourhood Plan has been made. That was in December 2021. And the application site is not an allocation for housing and is outside of the settlement boundary. The Section 106 agreement attached to the outline made provision for an amount of affordable housing, and this reserved matters application has been assessed for compliance with the agreement and current related policies. The consideration of the subject is set out in paragraph 9.2 onwards of the officer report, and whilst the proposed mix of market housing does not fully accord with the optimum mix set out in Henna, the quantum of each house size does accord with the emerging ideal mix as part of the draft policy H1 of the new local plan, which is based on the latest evidence. The proposed mix of market and affordable housing units is therefore considered acceptable. A landscape and visual impact assessment was provided at the outline application, and the current proposal includes enhancement to the existing site boundaries and a comprehensive landscaping scheme for both the application site and the Blue Land area to the northwest. The inspector, in considering the outline appeal, commented on the landscape character and of the area, and was also aware of an illustrative master plan showing how the land might be developed in the future back in 2020. He concluded that although the development of the site would introduce harms to the character and appearance of the countryside, the tilted balance approach taken in the determination of the appeal concluded that that harm was outweighed by the benefits of the scheme, and the appeal was allowed nonetheless. The submitted scheme is in general accordance with the indicative master plan, and it's considered that the layouts could not be adjusted to overcome the landscape impacts of the development. Having said this, the council's landscape officer is satisfied that the submitted planting and management proposals will provide a suitable scheme which will offer a suitable degree of screening from the surrounding countryside and an appropriate mix of colour and species within the new street scenes, and the landscaping proposal for the scheme is considered to be acceptable. So in terms of layout, that's considered in section 9.4 of the officer report, and this also explains how the proposal has been modified and improved during the course of the application. It's considered that the variety of house types, their architectural detailing, and how they are grouped provides visual interest and architectural animation, which is enhanced by the variety of finished floor levels, ridge heights, and materials. So overall, the proposed layout, scale and appearance of the development is considered acceptable for the reasons set out in the report before you. A plan has been submitted showing the amount of open space and the typologies for each area, and overall it's considered the development would provide good quality open space proportionate to the size and in accordance with the requirements of the Section 106 agreement. So amenity impact is discussed at section 9.6 of the agenda report, and this includes an assessment of impact to the existing neighbours and eventual occupiers of the houses proposed. So overall, it's concluded that the proposal is in general compliance with policies CS2, EV1, DS5 and the requirements of the NPPF and design supplementary planning document. Heritage impact is considered at section 9.7 and was an issue considered by the inspector in determining the outline appeal. In particular, he considered the impact to the setting of number 155 Maplewell Road, which was considered, and he concluded that the development would erode and cause harm to the significance of the property, but notwithstanding that, the appeal was allowed. It's considered that the reserved matters application before members does not worsen that harm. The impact on trees is set out paragraph 9.6 of the report. The application is accompanied by an arboricultural method statement and a comprehensive landscape scheme, which includes new trees, and it's considered the proposal accords with the relevant planning policies relating to trees and the development plan. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the applicant has worked with the council staff to ensure that all relevant information to assess biodiversity impact has been submitted in order to achieve net gains which can be delivered. It's concluded that the scheme is acceptable in terms of ecological impact and accords with development plan policies. So in terms of flood risk, the site is entirely within flood zone 1, being land at least risk of fluvial flooding, and proposed drainage works are included in the scheme. The lead local flood authority confirmed that the submitted drainage details are acceptable and suggest a planning condition, which is condition 10 of your report, to secure further drainage details. In terms of highway matters, the details of the highway accesses were considered, as I said, at the outline planning stage and approved by the granting of the appeal. And the reserved matters appears to be in conformity with those details as previously approved. The local highway authority has confirmed the internal layout of the roads accords with the Leicestershire Highway Design Guide and would be suitable for adoption. The LHA has also scrutinised the construction environmental management plan and the construction traffic routing plan and considers these details are acceptable. So infrastructure provision, section 106 agreement, the contributions were previously secured as detailed at section 9.12.3 of the officer report, and these are all index linked and considered to be SIL compliant. So to finish, the scheme is considered to be acceptable as set out in section 10 of your report and would achieve a good quality housing scheme, which would also deliver an element of affordable housing and contribute to essential infrastructure, landscaping and biodiversity. So it's recommended that the reserved matters application, including the submitted details to discharge conditions of the outline planning permission, be granted in accordance with the planning conditions in the officer report, but with that additional landscape implementation condition, as I mentioned at the start. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Liggins. We now have our speakers, and the first speaker I'm calling is Mr Richard Henderson on behalf of the applicant Davidson's Developments Limited. Mr Henderson. Oh, are you staying there?
Do you want me to sit there or go down?
Yeah, you have to sit in the hot seat here. Are you familiar? You seem to be familiar with the equipment. You've got 3 minutes in which to speak. When you've got 1 minute remaining, Miss Dobson will let you know.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Richard Henderson, Group Planning Manager at Davidson's Developments. We're the applicant for this proposal. Davidson's are a family-owned 5-star rated house builder with a track record of delivering quality housing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this reserved matters application, covering details of appearance, layout, landscaping and scale, and discharge of outline conditions 8, construction traffic, 9, drainage, 10, landscape, and 11, biodiversity, all of which are recommended for approval. The proposals deliver a high-quality, well-designed development incorporating high-quality materials. The proposals are in line with the concept details set out in the illustrative master plan, which was submitted with the outline application, and importantly also provide enhanced details including provision of bungalows, a greater extent of retention of the frontage hedgerow than was originally envisaged at outline stage, and enhanced landscaping scheme, as well as a layout and building form in keeping with the character of Maplewell Road. The design has been enhanced to the layout of the dwellings with a tighter building form closer to the site frontage, with low density and greater setbacks towards the top of the site, all of which are characteristics of Maplewell Road and are recognised in the conservation area appraisal. The dwellings themselves have been carefully considered and refined through several iterations to deliver high quality homes with numerous architectural references found within the village, presented with a palette of materials to include brick, stone, slate and renter, reflecting the area. The proposals deliver the maximum amount of dwellings permitted under the outline consent and provide a range of house types, of which 40% are affordable. The provision is in excess of the neighbourhood plan and emerging local plan requirement. The affordable mix includes a range of 1 to 3 bed homes, and the market mix aligns with the ranges set out in the emerging local plan. Ecological matters have been comprehensively addressed, and the proposals deliver an 82% biodiversity net gain in habitat units. The Council's Urban Design Officer supports the application. There are no technical objections to the proposals from any of the statutory consultees. The site delivers Section 106 contributions of approximately 350,000, of which 190,000 would be spent directly in Woodhouse Eaves itself. The proposals see a high quality, well-designed and comprehensive development, and I respectfully request your support for the approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Henderson. Our next speaker is Mr Mervyn Greenhow of Woodhouse Parish Council. Mr Greenhow, are you familiar with the equipment? There's a little one that looks like someone with a noise coming out of their mouth, and it goes red when you push. Oh yeah, you've got it there. So you've got 3 minutes to speak, and when you've got 1 minute remaining, Ms Dobson will let you know. Okay.
I'm here on behalf of the residents and excuse me, Woodhouse Parish Council to object to the proposed development on Maplewell Road. Our objections are not to housing in principle, but to the scale, design and location of the proposal and the harm it would cause to Woodhouse Eaves. The appearance and design are entirely out of keeping with this historic village. The layout is overbearing and generic, lacking any reference to local character. There is no proper use of traditional materials such as stone, reclaimed brick, sash windows or Swithland slate. Instead, the development would introduce modern blockwork, bright roof tiles and white render that would be an eyesore at a highly sensitive entrance to the village. This directly conflicts with the local and national design policies requiring development to respect and enhance its surroundings. The scale and dominance of the 36 dwellings would permanently harm the character of the area. The buildings are too dense, too close to the road, resulting in an incongruous development that will dominate the approach to the village, eroding the tree-lined and rural setting that defines Woodhouse Eaves. The proposal also fails to demonstrate genuine sustainability. Sustainable development is about building the right homes in the right place. A high-density scheme at a village gateway, relying heavily on car travel and harmful to local character, does not meet the objectives of the national planning policy framework and goes against the neighbourhood plan. There has been insufficient consideration of nature conservation and trees and biodiversity. This site forms part of a green approach to the village, and the loss of existing landscaping would harm visual amenity and nature conservation. The development will place additional strain on the local community, services, and village infrastructure. As a community, we recognise the need for new housing, but this site requires a more sensitive approach. Our preference is for a significant reduced scheme, preferably 15 dwellings, set further back from the road with high quality cottage style designs, traditional materials, strong landscaping, retained hedges and stone boundary walls that reflect the character of Woodhouse Eaves. In conclusion, this proposal fails on design, scale, amenity, safety, sustainability and character. We urge you to refuse the application or defer a decision until you review the alternative smaller proposal P/24/605/2. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Greenhow. Can I call our next speaker, who is the ward councillor, Councillor Snart? Welcome back, Councillor Snart.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I believe you're familiar with the equipment and your 3 minutes talking time. So Ms Dobson will let you know when there's 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After reading the update submission to the public consultation for the Natural Built Environment Team, dated 13th of October 2025, it's disappointing that there is no reference to how this proposal to deliver nearly half of the dwellings fronting Maplewell Road with the policies set out in Charnwood Local Plan and the Woodhouse Neighbourhood Plan. Indeed, with the report it is stated, the character appraisal identifies that while houses on the right have mostly large front gardens, in places the houses are hidden by trees and shrubs. There are some terraced houses, but most of the houses are individually, even when they are joined to their neighbours. This development is on the right-hand side of the highway. This proposal does not fit with policy S2 of the local plan, which states, respect and enhance the character of the area, having regard to space, density, massing, layout and materials. Woodhouse Neighbourhood Plan, policy 8.6, new development will be required to enhance and reinforce the local distinctiveness and the character of the area in which it's situated. I understand there is outline planning permission for the site, but having so many of the proposed units fronting Maple Road, it is my view this proposal clearly does not fit with the policies I have stated. There has been some movement on the layout with affordable units mixed with market dwellings and a small number of bungalows, which are welcomed. But marketing housing mix does not fit with the current plan. Indeed, the latest amendment sees changes to 5-bed properties. You may have noticed that there is another application for 15 dwellings going through the planning process. This too, I have concerns with this proposal. This is an important part of the village and in Charnwood Forest. In my view, this proposal does not respect and enhance the character of the area, therefore should be refused. Finally, it is concerning when I read in the submission of the Natural Built Environment team, this is the best solution attained under the circumstances. In my view, local planning authorities should not be compromising on decisions that affect this sensitive site within the heart of Charnwood Forest. It is clear to me there are better options for this site than this one and the other proposal still going through the planning process. It is all about, in my view, the layout of this site, and it could be much better of having some of the bigger dwellings on the front with more spatials between them. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Snart. Ms Liggins, do you have any comments about what the speakers have asked or said?
Yes, just very briefly. There's been mention about the quantum of development and it being out of scale and, overbearing impact, but the outline planning permission was granted for the erection of up to 36 dwellings, and that's what's being applied for now. The inspector previously considered an illustrative master plan, so they could envisage what the likely harms of any built form might be. But notwithstanding all those harms, the outline application was still allowed on appeal. The development proposed now generally conforms with that illustrative master plan. So whilst locals might prefer fewer dwellings or less, the quantum of 36 is what the inspector thought could be achieved and was to be acceptable up to that amount. In terms of the built frontage, as you saw from the slide, if I can just go back to it, there are dwellings that are fairly close and terraced houses close to the highway boundary already on Maplewell Road. They're the dwellings in the photograph directly next door to this application site. So I can see that the proposed dwellings, the artistic impression to the lower part of the slide, the white dwellings have taken architectural references from what is there on Maplewell Road already. And as you go down Maplewell Road, there is a good variety of house types because they were built at different times on an individual plot basis. So everybody had different ideas about what they'd like to achieve for themselves. So there isn't really a uniform pattern of houses apart from directly outside the site. So they have tried to take references from what's already in the street scene. And the submitted plan showing the mix of materials throughout the development does have a variety which are used elsewhere in Maplewell Road and in the village itself. So it's not in my officer opinion, it's not a huge deviation from what's already in the village elsewhere for the materials that are proposed. There was one other point about the urban design conservation area comments saying that this is the best that we could hope for this site, and that's addressed in issue 8 of the extras report before members. It's a site with constraints, not least the topography of the site. So to maximise the site frontage, which is a lower, more developable part of the site, they've obviously chosen a layout that achieves more dwellings to the site frontage, because the further up you go, the more rockier outcrops there are, the levels changes make it more difficult to achieve higher density. So that's one of the reasons why they've arrived at the layout that they have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Liggins. Members of the Planning Committee, if you would like to comment on this application, could you please raise your hand? Councillor Infield.
Thank you, Chair. So I visited the site this afternoon, and it's a beautiful piece of rolling countryside, which in my view should never be built on. However, we have the inspector to blame for this. We also have the inspector to blame for the fact that they agreed to the 36 houses. So the matter of scale, which people are upset about, is not something that we could do anything about, as far as I can see, according to planning law. I think the architects, as we've heard, were constrained as to how to use what is quite a rising site as you leave the road, so not easy. As far as I can see, they haven't done a terrible job. Almost all the critical comments that we heard from the speakers, which I'm sympathetic with, I feel we can't do anything about, because the inspector already anticipated that they would do damage to the countryside, they would do damage to the locally listed house, and this was all acceptable to him, and it's been written in black and white and reproduced in the officer's report. So sadly, I feel we can do very little about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Infield. Does anyone else wish to make any comments? Councillor Smidovics.
So what is going to happen, excuse me, what is going to happen about the drainage? Because we could see how wet it was today, and slopes going down towards the road. But I noticed on the page 126, I think it was, that there was a concern about the drainage. No, it's 128, sorry, flooding and drainage. And the easement.
Ms Liggins.
Yeah, drainage was one of the issues that the applicants worked really hard with the lead local flood authority to overcome concerns about drainage, but the scheme does include a comprehensive package of measures to control surface water runoff and deal with foul drainage as well. So the adverse weather conditions today, where we saw the river running down the hill, I don't think the majority of that was runoff from the field, although it could have, been part of it. But the development would capture any runoff and contain it within storage on the site before a hydraulic braking system would discharge it in a controlled way into the main stream. So the lead local flood authority are satisfied with the drainage solution that they've worked hard on.
Are there any other comments or, Councillor Rees-Gorrillosi?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on a couple of points of design that some of the speakers raised. So just firstly, just to clarify, the artist's impressions we've got in front of us, they are reflective of the house types that we've got submitted here, aren't they? They're not just sort of, no, so they are that. Okay, that's good. And I read in the design and access statement that there's some pictures of various other areas around the village and how they've incorporated those sort of stylistic features into these designs here, and they show that. But let's say some of the speakers made a good point in that there are some other design features that are a little bit incongruous with what's already in the village. So, for example, that area up to Switzerland is very well known for its slate roof tiles. And I can see here that's sort of a feature that's mentioned in the pack for some of the house types, but not for others. I would guess that they've broken them up like that to add variation, but would it be in our gift to add a condition that we want all of the roof tiles to be slate? Is that something we could do at this stage?
Thank you. I believe there was mention of Switzerland slate. Switzerland slate is as rare as rocking horse manure, for want of a phrase, and the stocks of that are being used to preserve heritage buildings that have Switzerland slate already. So it's a limited resource. So that's been dedicated to use on heritage restoration buildings. And we don't advocate its use on new build properties at all because it's so rare. So what the developer has included is a mix of materials, and there's a plan submitted showing the mix of materials for each plot. And I feel that the variety is reflective of the materials within the village. It's not necessary to necessarily create a pastiche of what's in the village in terms of your architectural features. They don't have to include everything that already exists, because they're trying to create a new development that would have its own distinctiveness, but which blends in with the character of the village. But I believe that the mix of materials that they've proposed is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. And then I think you did answer this in your response to Councillor Smart, but just for clarity, because one of the things I'd noticed as well, we're not breaching any clustering rules here anyway, are we? But I did notice that all of the affordable housing was like right on the front on the road and everything else is further back. But I'm fairly sure you said that that's in relation to the slope that we've got on that would make the higher density properties more difficult to do at the top. Is that right? Is that the reason that we've got this distribution of houses that we do?
Yes, I believe that's the main reason. Also, registered housing providers do like to have them clustered for management purposes, and they find it practically more easier to take them on if they're close to each other. So as I said, yeah, the frontage of the site is developed that way to maximise the lower ground levels and contribute more to the street scene.
Thank you both. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. If I was a carpenter, no, if I was an architect and I was given this project to design something that would reflect the character of similar buildings around it. Unfortunately, my slide hasn't got the actual buildings on there, on the slide. I don't know why. That's exactly what I would come up with. But of course, those buildings that we can see were built the turn of the century. They hadn't got cars. They relied on very large back gardens for kitchen gardens for different reasons. So for an architect to come along and copy that, they also have to copy the lifestyle that was being lived at the time. We're a different era now. We've got a different lifestyle, and it's all round cars. It's all around parking. And although these look very attractive, and I think what you've said, we've got our hands tied, really. But I do worry about buildings, houses that are built on the main road like this. I know how lazy people are, and I include myself in that category sometimes. And if I would like to pull up my car outside my front door. And it worries me that that is what's going to happen with this development, that people are going to park outside their house, that the retained hedges will become depleted over the time because people will be beating a different way into their front garden. And I think the attractiveness that the architect is going for, and obviously the developer to market the buildings, will be depleted in 2 or 3 years' time, with cars that are parked up to half on the path, half on the road, and it just worries me. And I'm not inventing that. It happens, and you see it quite often. Again, it's nothing that we can comment about, nothing we can complain about. But I feel very strongly that architects need to understand that we are a different era now to the chocolate box pictures of existing houses. We need to come up with something totally different to govern today's type of living. They look lovely, but I don't think they'll stay looking lovely. I think it will be dominated by cars on the front there, and I think the hedge will get depleted, and the object of making it, keeping the hedge there, will just go and be forgotten and be cleared away to make it easier to get into your front door from your car that's parked outside the house. That is my feeling, but it's my feeling, it's not an objection. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the committee? We need to move towards a decision. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I've listened with interest to all the speakers and the officers, and I've been through the report in detail 2 or 3 times, and the inspector has laid down certain things. We all have views on what we would like and not like, but we have to go with what's in front of us, and therefore I am proposing we accept officer's recommendation, taking into account the extras report, which starts on page 4 of the extras report and goes right the way through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fryer. One moment. Ms Liggins.
With the recommendation to include the extra landscape condition that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the proposal needs to include reference to that also, if you're happy with that. Thank you.
Yes, I am happy with that, as outlined by the officer. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Councillor Roberts. Can you please, so we're voting on whether to support officer's recommendation and the amendments included in the extras and the landscaping. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I made 10.
Thank you. So
Chair, I can confirm that the motion's carried.
Thank you, Mr Evans. We now move on to item 5A, which is sure you want me to wait for a moment? Yeah. Members of the committee. Hello. We're now going to item 5A, which is number P/25/1326/2, parcel A2 and B2, Broadnook, land north of Birstall. And I'd like to refer to our planning officer, Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Okay, so this application requires determination by Plans Committee because it seeks to vary a planning condition to a planning permission which was granted following a resolution by the Plans Committee. And in accordance with the Council's constitution, the Chair and Vice Chair of the Plans Committee are of the opinion that the proposed variation would not be minor in nature. Okay, so let's just quickly, I'll just run over the history of the wider site to start with. Just to let you know, this is the site location plan submitted as part of the original hybrid planning application. The application site itself comprises part of phase 1 of what we know as the North of Birstall Sustainable Urban Extension, which is Broadnook Garden Village. The Broadnook Garden Village comprises 204 hectares and is allocated on land north of Birstall, to the north of the A46 and the west of the A6, as you can see here by the red line. This was the image, the aerial image submitted as part of the original hybrid permission, just to show you the extent of the site. Okay, so as I mentioned, hybrid planning permission was granted, which means that outline permission was granted for certain elements, and so was full planning permission. This, if you can work it out, shows the outline, and the blue is the areas of land subject to the full permission. And I say that because the parcels subject to this application secured full planning permission. So just to confirm, at Broadnook, the hybrid permission granted outline permission for the erection of 1,950 dwellings, 15 hectares of employment land, and a sui generis car showroom, the erection of a primary school, a local centre comprising shops, supermarkets and other uses, the erection of an assisted living retirement village of up to 175 units and a 70-bed care home, the erection of a community resource centre, the provision of 4 plots for travelling show people, green infrastructure, outdoor sports provision, creating a new village. Detailed planning permission was granted for the erection of, it was actually 193 at the time the original permission has been granted, but since then, another previous section 73 applications granted for an increase to 206 dwellings. There was also the full planning permission was granted for sports pitches, a sports pavilion, and all this sort of infrastructure works like the roads. Okay, so this is an approved development framework parameter plan, and it sets out the development parcels, the areas of green infrastructure, the sports provision. The land outlined in red is the land subject to this current section 73, which we know as parcels A2 and B2. Okay, so just to make you aware that the planning permission was structured around a detailed design and access statement, the parameters plans that I'm just showing you one of, and a series of framework and strategy documents. These together guide how the development will come forward by establishing a design framework. The details in these documents are secured by planning conditions and a legal agreement. And this SUE, the Broadnook Garden Village, is a key part of delivering the council's overall spatial strategy, and is allocated in the emerging local plan and in the current core strategy. The first condition requires all reserve matters applications to be submitted by the end of 2035. So we're looking at delivery over the next 10 to sort of 12 years. Okay, let's see what slide I've got next. Okay, so this is in your appendix. It's Appendix B. It's one of the approved parameter plans. And it sets out the high housing densities per development parcel. I just sort of showed you an arrow where, bear with me, let me see if this works. I'm hoping, sorry, I'm just hoping to find my mouse to show you. Thank you, sorry, I just needed some support there. Just to show you, oh look, I'm not very good at this technology, am I? I keep losing the mouse, bear with. Where's it gone? There we go.
I'll put it down a bit.
Thank you. This isn't going to go well, is it, if I can't use my equipment? Okay, so can you see? No, it's gone again now. Okay, I put an arrow to show where the parcels are, but I've got another plan. Well, this shows here, so just to show you, here's the where the parcels are. Okay, so this is the most latest aerial image, obviously courtesy of Google Maps. It just shows you the changes that have taken place since the hybrid permission was granted in 2020. You can see the road infrastructure has sort of started to be built. Some of the units have been built in the parcels closest to the road infrastructure. The two stars show you the land subject to this application. Okay, so as I said to you, this application relates to what we know, the southern part of parcel A2 and parcel B2, albeit the proposed variations as part of this application only apply to the plots in parcel B2. These parcels comprise approximately 4.97 hectares and are located sort of relatively central within the Broadnock SUE. As part of the full element, as I said, planning permission was granted for 102 dwellings on these parcels. In May last year, a Section 73 permission was granted, which increased the total number of dwellings to 115. Okay, on this plan shows the current approved layout on the left-hand side and the proposed layout. Just wanted to say that this application seeks permission under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to vary one of the conditions of the baseline hybrid permission. The number of dwellings across these parcels would remain unchanged at 115, and the proposals do not seek to alter the general layout and arrangement. The proposed variation consists of changes to the house type, layout and landscaping for 22 plots on the lower parcel, parcel B2. The proposal includes the introduction of 5 additional house types, although most of the changes utilise the house types as previously approved. In addition, the proposed variation seeks to change the approved market housing mix. The proposal seeks an increase in the overall number of 4-bed plus properties at the site by 5, and as a result, a reduction in the number of 2-bed and 3-bed properties. This slide shows, as I said, the approved layout, but given the sort of scope, there's 115 dwellings here, it's really hard to work out the details. So I've got a couple of plans just to show the areas zoomed in. So again, this is showing the parcel B2, which is subject to the changes. Okay, so there's 22 plots and 10, 11 and 15 are 3 of them. Hopefully you can see, I'm not even going to attempt to use my mouse, I'm afraid. So plot 10 is on the top right-hand side, and then obviously 11 is adjacent to it, and then 15 is down the bottom of that. So hopefully you'll be able to see, well, if you can, the changes that are proposed as part of these plots. The next plan is to the sort of the western side of the southern parcel. These are the plot numbers subject to the Section 73 variation, and they run sort of around the perimeter of the site. Hopefully you'll be able to see sort of any of the changes. I mean, if you look at, say, plots 50 and 51 down the bottom, you've got the detached garage, where now they're going to have built-in garages. There's no detached garages. And then these show the changes to the plots on the east side of that parcel. As I say, there's no increase in numbers, changes to the plot substitutions. Okay. Here's a couple of the images of the new house types, just examples, not all of them. It just shows you the style and the design. Okay. Before I move on to the site photos, as mentioned previously, the proposed variation seeks to change the approved market housing mix. This seeks an increase in the overall number of 4+ bedrooms at site by 5, and then a reduction of 1 2-bed and 4 3-bed properties. Now, a detailed assessment can be found in section 9.2 of the report, which starts on page 32 of your agenda pack. I'm sure you've already read the report, but the most sort of important data and information is in figure 6, which is at the top of page 35. This shows the approved and proposed market housing mix for these parcels and the differences between them. In addition, figure 12 at the bottom of page 37 shows the combined market housing mix approved currently at the site. And at the moment, there's 490 market houses approved at the various parcels with consent. And that shows a combined total as approved. And there's also a sort of column to show as proposed and the difference under this section 73. Okay, so I've only got a couple of photos really, but this shows the approach to parcel A2 and B2. A2 is on the right, there's no changes to that parcel, and then B2 is on the left. The second photo is shown looking across parcel B2, which is currently, looks like they're storing materials. And this sort of just shows, again, the most northern part of B2, and then we've got the southern boundary of A2, looking across to the Broadnook Spinney. Okay, so the key considerations are set out in the report. I don't propose to summarise them because they're summarised in the report. I just want to say that, you know, as set out in paragraph 10.9, which is page 43 of the agenda pack, it is recommended that the section 73 application is granted, and the reasons are set out in that, in the conclusion, but also obviously throughout the report. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms Stone. I understand that we've just got one speaker on this application, and that is Joe Round on behalf of Vistry Group. Mr. Round, are you familiar with the equipment with which to speak?
I'm not. I was watching others though, so I have half of them.
All right. You know, there's a red button to the right of you. That's it. You've got 3 minutes in which to speak, and when you've got 1 minute remaining, Ms Dobson will let you know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Joe Round, Senior Engineer at Vistry, the applicant for this proposal. Vistry are a 5-star house builder committed to delivering high-quality homes at Broadnook Garden Village. The proposals before you today are for plot substitutions and alterations to 22 plots to assist with the deliverability and viability of this early parcel as part of the wider development. As set out within the committee report, the proposals have been subject to extensive discussions with officers and the council's urban and landscape officers, and they find them acceptable. The amendments represent modest changes to the approved design and layout. As confirmed by the case officer, the proposals respect the design considerations of the previous permissions and would accord with the design aspirations for the Broadnook SUE. The proposals represent a very minor change to the housing mix of a single parcel, which should be considered in the context of the wider development. The change in mix represents less than 1% of the homes approved on Broadnook to date, with a further 1,356 homes to be approved.
The remainder of the development is capable of achieving a balanced housing mix. There are no objections to the proposals from any consultees, the ward members, parish councils, or the members of the public, and the officer has recommended approval of the application. With this in mind, we would respectfully request that the members support the officer's recommendation and approve the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Round. Do you have anything else to add, Miss? I can't get your name right. It's Miss Stone.
Don't worry, it's one of those days. No, but I have worked out how to use my mouse, so that's quite good now.
Thank you. Members of the Planning Committee, do you wish to speak? Councillor Seaton first and then Councillor Smithers speak.
Hi, I'm just really curious as to why it's come to the Planning Committee tonight. Just curious, please. I think you sort of said that I think the chair and that vice chair have decided that it was enough. But if I objected, what could I possibly object to? So what is the point of it coming here? So with that said, I would like to propose officers' recommendations.
Do you wish to respond, Miss Stone?
Thank you. Only just I set out in my presentation that, you know, the chair and vice chair didn't consider the variations were minor. So, maybe they may be able to explain the reasons why.
Councillor Smithers.
I'm just a bit curious as well. On page 19, it talks on 5.7, seeks to encourage minimum space standard for housing. But this document has not been adopted for the purposes of development management at Charnwood Borough. So I'm just curious because it's got policy H3 of the emerging local plan is therefore a material consideration. So we're talking about space and we're talking about adding extra houses. So I just wondered what it is about the space that's important, obviously enough to mention it on 5.7.
Miss Stone.
Thank you, Chair. This is a document that's produced by the government, and it's actually, I think it was first produced in 2015. The council have included those standards as part of its merging policy, which is why it is a material consideration, because obviously significant weight can now be afforded. So whilst we haven't yet adopted the standards, we will hopefully very soon be adopting a local plan which requires the standards to be complied with unless there are circumstances that allow for that deviation. So that's why it's a material consideration as part of all of the applications for residential development, and has been for quite a while actually, now the last few months, if not a year. So.
Yeah, it's the first time I've noticed that comment, but I do have another question. I think you mentioned the changes in the garage. Some are integral now and not separate. So do we know the width of them?
Of the integral garages, I mean, I've not measured them all, but where there are integral garages are also off-road parking spaces. And the Highways Authority have reviewed the scheme, and I do report that there are 2 plots where they don't meet the current parking standards, but the Highways Authority have said that it's unreasonable to, refuse this on those basis. It is in the report, but so I haven't measured them and scaled off, but I know the Highway Authority have considered the application.
Councillor Fryer.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am happy to agree that we accept officer's recommendation as per the report and the extras. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of points. It is a bit sad that 1, 2, 3 bedroom houses are being reduced because they're starter homes, but I get that Broadnook is in a rural area, so perhaps best use of the space could be 4 and 5 bedroom home, but it is sad that you're losing starter homes, because there's a couple of points I want to point out. Is Broadnook, of all the current developments, has actually got a really good 127 bus link already. And as the bus goes over, because I've been on the top deck, you can see the whole development that is being developed. The only sad thing is you've obviously got the one lit width from the waterworks, but overall, I don't generally have any objections, but it's just a bit sad that we're losing 2 and 3 bedroom homes. But hey ho, there'll still be more, because I mean there's thousands in this one, so me.
Councillor Corey-Losley.
Thank you, Chair. So I've already kind of discussed this in quite a lot of detail with officers, so I won't repeat myself too much, but just so that all members of the committee are aware, why Chair and I thought this was an important thing to bring to the committee. Appreciate that we're only talking about a handful of houses on what is a very large development. But this is the second, Section 73, on this parcel alone. We are seeing affordable houses, as Councillor Roberts pointed out, disappearing from it. And we're about a third through the Broadnook Zoo as a whole, I think, now in terms of approvals. And we are very, very heavily skewed in the direction of 4 bedroom properties. And we are lacking 2 beds and 3 beds, both of which are set out we have a need for in the 2022 Housing Needs Assessment. This particular parcel is one of the intermediate parcels in terms of density. So that means that it's kind of got a mix of large, and was supposed to have a mix of large and sort of smaller homes. There are higher density parcels, 2 of which are already approved, 2 of which are yet to be approved. And then a great number of the low density parcels where we're likely to see large houses that haven't been approved yet. So as a layman, and I am a layman, I'm not a planner myself, but that does seem to me like a lot of this development is left to be approved, and a lot of that is where we were planning to have all the large 4 bedroom houses, not the small houses. So while this, we take it on its own because that's what we do here, even though we are asked to consider this in the context of the wider zoo, it's only a handful of houses, so it'd be very difficult to find good planning reasons why we couldn't accept this particular Section 73. But there is absolutely no guarantee that we will not have other developers bring similar Section 73s on each parcel on this development. And in 2035, 2040, could very well be sat here and looking at a completed Broadnook Zoo with a very, very disproportionate housing mix. Who's to say what we will and won't need in the future? The Housing Needs Assessment 2022 will be very old by then. But, we can see the way this development is trending. We can see how the housing market is trending. You don't have to be a planning expert to guess that in that time we will need starter homes just as we do today. So while it would be difficult to find planning reasons to outright reject this application here, I think as a committee, we need to watch these applications very, very carefully, because with the decisions we make here, we make for all time. And we have guidelines, we have these assessments. In the interest of trying to make the right decision for our residents, it's very, very important that we take that seriously. Thank you.
Do you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just really wanted to clarify a few points. Just really to say that at the moment of the 1,950 dwellings, there is consent, detailed consent or full permission for 594. So the detail for 1,356 is still to come forward. Just really want to explain that this parcel can't be seen in isolation. It's part of the wider development. Consideration should be given to the delivery of the housing mix across the whole site, and that the inclusion of the different density zones and different sizes and dwellings that are required to create a sort of a place, so we expect there will be differences in the housing mix across the different parcels. We have two with quite high density, quite a large number of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. We've got this parcel that's got the larger units on. They are still providing some 2 and 3 bed properties. It's just they want a few more extra larger ones. We consider as officers there are mechanisms in the conditions in section 106 to manage the future delivery of the housing mix, and that although none of us can foresee what's going to happen in 10 years, things change. There'll be, new MPPF soon, there'll be latest evidence, housing evidence to say that maybe we do need lots of small or lots of big units. We don't know, but we know that there is a requirement to provide a range of house types, mix and sizes, as well as 16.36% of all housing across the whole site. And we know that we're going to monitor and do our best to manage that, but have to adapt and provide the flexibility as things change. So I really just want to give members assurance that process is in place. There is mechanisms in the conditions to secure that. And on balance, because of the fact that this is a 5 units out of 115, we think that, there will be opportunities to redress this in the future parcels coming forward.
Councillor Infield.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I have the same sort of concerns that gave rise to this being brought to this committee. So, if we look at the figures that are in the tables where we were already below both the HENA and the Emerging Policy H4, and now we're moving even further away from it. And that worried me. So then I saw the so-called reassuring comments. For example, it remains that the overall site is required to achieve the required housing mix. And I think that's what Officer Stone was just talking about. So I would really like to know how that's going to work, because as we heard from Councillor Lou, if the ones that come in at the end are the ones that are meant to be low density, and then we're saying, well, we're way, way off the required housing mix, so actually we've got to scrap that, we've got to replace them all by, terraced houses or something. Have you got the teeth to do that? Can you guarantee to us that that process will happen and we won't be left with the situation here where this sets a precedent, the next developer, the next site over there, they come along with the Section 73, they do the same, and they do the same, and they do the same. Why wouldn't they? Because they make more money. And that's what drives them. That's what developers are about, profit. And that's why they're moving to 4 bedrooms, because they make more money on them than on the small ones. We all know that. So what tools have we got to stop that process? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. As I briefly touched on, there is sort of a conditional requirement to try and manage and deliver the housing mix. So there is a condition, and it is in the conditions. It's condition number 17. So it's a conditional requirement to submit details of the housing mix and the affordable housing prior to commencement of any development on any of the phases or sub-phases. So every time an application, before somebody wants to start on the parcels, they have to provide that information. And so we're tracking that information. Not only that, there's another conditional requirement for developers to submit what we call a development framework planning brief for phases 2 and 3. So as we come to an end of phase 1, they need to provide that information, which should also include details of housing and other land use disposition. So that's kind of the mechanism that we're going to utilise, and we're already in discussions with the development partners about ensuring, so we've got the data of what's been proposed and approved on each parcel. And then we're now looking at exactly what you're saying about, okay, so how's this going to be readdressed? Now, we have comfort that there are parcels on that site that are meant to be what we call higher density. So we know that they should be. With the higher density comes the smaller unit. So there should be 1 and 2 sort of smaller units. So we've got 2 phases where there's going to be mixed, those kind of parcels, and there's be parcels that offset that with the higher density. But we're confident that the Henna mix that's currently approved, we'll be able to redress that so that it is in accordance with the latest evidence at each time.
Are you content to finish your comments then? Councillor Enfield, Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I'd just like to echo the comments made by other councillors. I think, as the officer said, we're talking about 5 units out of 115 here, which seems like small beans, really. But it sets a precedent, I think, and the precedent is that we're moving away from smaller starter homes, affordable, whatever, to 4 or 5 bedroom houses. And I sort of echo the point that Councillor Corrie-Loseley made. In 25 years, 30 years' time, people will be living with the consequences of the decision made in this meeting. It is a small number, but I think it has big implications. Thank you.
Mr. Upton.
Yeah, if I could. I can understand the concerns that have been expressed, and these are long timescales that we're talking about. Just to hopefully calm some of the anxiety, in my view, clearly in such a significant scale of scheme and the small quantum that's expressed here and the mechanisms that Ms Stone set out, there is a regular monitoring and management mechanism built into the base permissions and Section 73s. That means that there certainly isn't a precedent being set this evening. It's a regular activity, as other people have mentioned, in terms of Section 73 applications on such a significant scheme. And I just wanted to give members that reassurance that you're not setting a precedent this evening. It's an anticipated type of application on a scheme of this significance. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fryer. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you. I think all the comments we've done about losing housing types are all very laudable, but my question wasn't to doubt or to take the significance away. It was the fact that we've got no teeth to complain or refuse anyway, and it is a standard thing to do with housing types. It is market-led. And that's why we have the housing market there. And obviously they've found out that they can sell more 4-bedroomed houses than they can 3-bedroomed houses. And I think at this day and age as well, we've got HMOs in that, haven't we? That could be a factor as well of having big houses, big money from rents on HMOs. We can't rule those out. So that is, I don't want to set a precedent, obviously, and we've lost some 3-bedroomed house. And we did come across a compromise the other week on one of the plans where the council were gifted one house instead. So there's those compromises around, and it's right. We do have to keep our eye on that. And that's why we have the planners up here that I hope are keeping an eye on that for us. So, as I say, my proposal still stands.
Councillor Fryer.
Thank you. I think Councillor Seaton has almost said what I was going to say. I think it's very hard for us to look ahead 25 years and decide we made wrong decisions now. We can all say that. And I think we need a variety. We also need a variety of properties that bring in a variety socially. We don't want to go back to isolated places that are, this is for 6-bedroom or 5-bedroom house. This is only for 1-bedroom house. We want the estate to be cohesive, to be inclusive. And we're all living longer. I'm quite thankful in a way that hopefully one member of my family will have enough room for me to move into soon. So as I say, I seconded the proposal by Councillor Seaton.
Any further comments? I've got some comment about it because both the Section 73 applications we've had for this particular parcel of land have been submitted as a fact of making the site viable. Presumably that means financially viable for the developer. The first one was an increase of 12 homes on the plot from the original, I think it was 102, now it's 115. So they've had an extra 12 houses built, or proposed that there'll be an extra 12 houses, which we thought and they thought would make the site viable. Now they're chopping back away so that we're getting fewer and fewer 3 and 2 bedroomed homes under the same viability excuse, if you like. So yeah, I don't feel as though I've got enough confidence to support the decision, but we might as well move to the vote because nobody else wants to speak on it. So all those in favour of going with officers, supporting officers' decision to allow the application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8.
All those against?
2.
Thank you.
Chair, I confirm that's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. So we're now going to move to the final item on the agenda tonight, which is item 5C, and Councillor Corey Losley called it in, so he's off. Is it within my gift to try to get a vice chair here?
You can ask members would vote.
Would members want to introduce a vice chair just for this item, or are you okay as you are? Hello? Councillor Seaton? We're without a vice chair. It's only for the one item. Is anyone? No, I mean, the members have to propose someone if they want to. The members need to propose. Oh, all right then. Does anybody second that?
Shall we vote on that?
Yes, can we vote on whether Councillor Seaton is going to come up here and support?
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Yeah, gives you a bit of exercise, don't it? Oh, is it okay if I close? Where's Councillor Corey Losley gone? Oh, is it gone? Right. I'm going to move his laptop out of the way. Yeah,
Instead of me putting mine on.
Okay then. Right, sorry about that, everyone. So, here he is. Do you want me to close your laptop? So we are here and we are correct.
Mr. Upton.
We've lost Mr. Upton.
Is Mr. Upton gone?
No, he's coming back.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sure we won't be upset.
We're going to item 5C, number P/24/0077/2, Frederick Street, Loughborough. I'd like to refer to our planning officer, Mrs. Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. First of all, I'd just like to mention that the extras report does cover a few extra points for this application. So we have received the Lead Local Flood Authority consultation response, and they confirm that they're happy with the application and they recommend 4 conditions which are set out in the extras report. The report also recommends the deletion of condition 24 because it's covered sufficiently by condition 14. And the report recommends an additional condition 31 regarding the use of the building as purpose-built student accommodation, which is a sui generis use. I've also got a verbal update in relation to condition 16, which relates to the management of the site. We are recommending that point 6 of that condition is amended to read Monday to Sunday, 9 till 5, rather than Monday to Friday. So I will now proceed to the rest of the presentation. So this application is for the erection of 2-storey student accommodation consisting of 38 bedrooms contained in 7 cluster flats and a new vehicular access to Frederick Street. This is the application site. So it's land to the rear of number 77 Frederick Street, which is on the corner of Frederick Street and Arthur Street, and land to the rear of numbers 2 to 14 Arthur Street. The site abuts Frederick Street and also abuts the private lane to the south and abuts the garden of number 16 Arthur Street. Land levels are relatively flat and currently the site is empty. So this slide just shows the site in context. So you can see the residential properties which are adjacent to the site and opposite the site. And in green is indicating the Queen's Park Conservation Area, which is also adjacent to the site. So the site is within the setting of that conservation area. So this is an aerial image. It's a couple of years old, this aerial image, but it does indicate that the site is currently unused and doesn't form part of the gardens of those properties any longer on Arthur Street. So this is some site photographs taken recently. So this is the site frontage onto Frederick Street, and you can see the close boarded fencing, which marks the boundary, and the new site access would be roughly between where that lamppost is and the existing wall of number 77. It's also worth noting that there are 2 existing accesses that front onto Frederick Street. So the private lane you can see in the photograph, and also you can see the gap in the boundary wall of number 77. That's also a dropped curb access to number 77. This is looking the other way. So this is pointing towards the bend in Frederick Street, which is where it curves around to join Browns Lane. And you can note the double yellow lines along the frontage of Frederick Street there. And this is looking, that car there is just turning the corner from Browns Lane into Frederick Street, and the site is on the left-hand side. And these are the properties on Arthur Street, which back onto the site. And this is a photograph of the site itself. So you can see number 77, which has that brick-built garage on the corner, and the properties on Arthur Street that back onto the site. Again, looking further along, that's also further properties backing on from Arthur Street. And then this is the site boundary, which is adjacent to number 16, and you can see the existing walnut tree there and the site boundary. So this is a photograph showing the private lane, which is adjacent to the site, and that is number 85 Frederick Street on the other side of the lane. And looking up that lane with the site on the right-hand side. And this is looking down the lane with the site on the left-hand side and number 85 Frederick Street on the right. This is number 85 Frederick Street, which is opposite the site. And taking a step further back, looking down the lane, where those cars are parked, that's actually the rear garden of number 16. So they're utilising their garden as a parking area adjacent to the site. So that's the garden of number 16 and the tree on the site boundary. So this is the proposed site layout. So you have 2 blocks of accommodation. So the block at the front here will contain 3 cluster flats, and then the block here at the back will contain 4 cluster flats. The site access here is from Frederick Street, and you will have 2 staff car parking spaces, a turning area, so you'll be able to turn around and go out in forward gear. And there's also some cycle parking storage here, with cycle parking for a 1 cycle per resident. So at least 38 cycle spaces. And then there's an offset from the walnut tree, and this is open space. So there's no encroachment on the root protection area of that existing tree. And then there's areas of landscaping around the site. So the ground floor plans, so this is Frederick Street down here. So you've got the 3 cluster flats here with the bin store adjacent to them, and then the 4 cluster flats to the rear of the site with the site manager's office. And like I say, the cycle parking, the open space area, and the parking and reversing and turning areas. And the first floor levels and second floor levels. So this is the proposed frontage onto Frederick Street. You can see a very traditional style of property reflecting the conservation area context. And you've also got a new boundary walls, brick boundary walls, which will also reflect the context of the conservation area and this part of the town. And then this is the elevation that will face the private lane. So the rear of the building to the rear of the site will face onto the lane, and this elevation will face onto the lane as well. So Frederick Street is here. And then this is within the site. So you have this elevation will face onto the access, and this elevation will face into the site. And that's the northwest elevation. And so the key considerations are set out and listed here, which are all covered in the report. I won't go into detail because they're all set out in the report. So I will just finish by saying the conclusion and recommendations are set out in sections 10 and 11 of the report. The recommendation is to approve, subject to section 106 and conditions, and that includes the extra conditions in the extras report and the amendment to condition 16, which I referred to in the verbal update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Garbett. We have some speakers on this item, and the first of the speakers is Dr. Carol Humphreys on behalf of the Stora Area Residents Group. Hello, Dr. Humphreys. Are you familiar with the equipment down there? Okay, you have 3 minutes in which to speak, and when you've got 1 minute remaining, Miss Dobson will let you know. Yeah, press the button on your right.
Can you hear me? Yes. Right, okay. I represent SARG, which is a local residents group. And as local councillors and local residents, I'm sure you're already familiar with generic harms associated with too much purpose-built student accommodation in a small area. For this application, I can summarise it at 3 different levels. There's the immediate vicinity. For a house on Arthur Street, the development is akin to having a 2-storey residential block in your back garden. The only vehicle access is directly onto a busy residential street. So more people, more noise, more traffic, more bins on pavements. Then there's the impact on the local community. There's already a large community imbalance with an overrepresentation of students who tend to be young, single and temporary. A problem for shops as the local economy is moving to term time only and there is no incentive for anyone to become involved in the local community, as each PBSA resident knows they will be moving on in 9 months. Then there's the impact on Charnwood as a whole. This type of development uses local services, so extra pressure on street wardens, parking enforcement, waste management, etc., without any financial contribution via council tax. Hence, it has a knock-on negative impact for all Charnwood residents. Also, PBSA does not fully contribute to housing targets. If every development opportunity site in Loughborough is used for PBSA, then other areas in the borough, Barrow, Shepshed, Corn, Woodhouse Eaves, have to provide extra development to offset this. And a few facts to inform your decision. There is no vast unmet need for PBSA, but there is a shortage of other housing types. Figures on student numbers published by the university show no significant increase in the last 5 years, so no pressing need. This can be set against the university building more on campus, as well as other PBSA developments already approved. For example, Brookside, 190 Ashby Road, the one opposite the Priory. There is no evidence that an increase in PBSA means fewer HMOs. This unsupported claim that HMOs will magically disappear cannot be included as benefits. Studies from both Durham and Canterbury support the idea that PBSA is not the preferred student option for second and third years. This is a combination of wanting to live with a small group of friends and PBSA typically being more costly. On balance, the cumulative harm outweighs the perceived benefits, and as such, this application should be rejected. There are valid planning grounds to reject this development. If this is what you want to do, the officer's job to help you frame the wording for rejection. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Humphreys. Our next speaker is Mr. Will Ost, who is the agent on behalf of WA Architecture. Mr. Ost, are you familiar with the, I think you've been before, haven't you? So you have 3 minutes in which to speak, and when 1 minute is remaining, Ms. Dobson will let you know.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in favour of the application. I'm here to outline why this proposal represents a responsible and well-considered development that balances the needs of students with the interests of the existing local community. The scheme proposes 38 bedrooms arranged across 7 cluster flats. The site is taken from the long back gardens of the houses on Arthur Street, and even after this development, the remaining gardens are ample, ensuring that the character and amenity of the existing homes are preserved. We've carefully designed the scheme to comply fully with all separation distance requirements between the proposed development and the surrounding housing. This ensures that privacy and amenity for existing and new residents are fully protected. I'm also pleased to note that both the planning officers and the conservation officers are supportive of the scheme. They have recognised that the design has been carefully considered to respond sensitively to the style, scale and proportions of the adjacent housing stock. This demonstrates that the development not only respects but complements the character of the local area. The scheme incorporates a managed site office and a robust student management plan. The applicant recognises that managing student behaviour is key, and the plan is specifically designed to minimise any potential antisocial behaviour. This includes clear protocols for residents and ongoing engagement with the local community to address any issues swiftly. In addition, the design includes a practical drop-off area which will allow for easy and safe student arrivals and departures at the start and end of each term. This reduces congestion on the surrounding streets and ensures a smooth process for both students and local residents. In summary, this proposal makes efficient use of an underutilised part of the town, provides high-quality accommodation for students, and does so in a way that respects the amenity and character of the existing neighbourhood. The plans are carefully thought through to mitigate any potential issues and to contribute positively to the local area.
Thank you very much. Our third speaker on this item is Councillor Corey Loseley, who is the ward councillor and made the call in. I'll leave you to it, shall I? 1 minute when you've nearly used up your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So I find myself back here once again, speaking against another large PBSA being built in my ward, this time in a much more residential area. Members will recall that when I spoke on the Browns Lane application back in July, I shared many concerns from residents. These range from highway safety and parking amenity to overbearing scale and a loss of privacy, not to mention noise, both static and transient. Now, just a 300-metre walk up the road, we're looking at another very similar application and identical concerns. You may remember that back in July, I quoted policy H8 of the new local plan, which, as you know, is now extremely close to adoption. This policy states that it is positive in its approach to PBSAs, only on the proviso that they avoid damage to the social and physical character of the local area. And very importantly, crucially, H8 takes into account cumulative effects. There are 2 points raised there, both of which are very important considerations when it comes to the application that you have before you tonight. Firstly, are members completely content that this application avoids damage to the social and physical character of the area as H8 requests? Secondly, according to policy H8, we're supposed to be taking into account cumulative effects. With a large PBSA at the end of Browns Lane and this one right at the top of the road, it's hard to imagine any scenario where these applications could be any more cumulative without them being directly next door to one another. Another material consideration that is always really important with this type of application is antisocial noise. Student blocks have a reputation for being a generator of noise, and the William Street, Arthur Street, Frederick Street area is already notorious for this and for other forms of antisocial behaviour. Members will have seen that comments made by Leicestershire Police reflect this reality. It is a high crime area. Are members happy that all steps have been taken to minimise noise and antisocial behaviour impacts on the immediate neighbours? For instance, I note that the communal outdoor area is immediately adjacent to private gardens, and in warmer months it is not unreasonable to assume that this will be a location for parties late into the night. Finally, I would ask members to spare a thought for those on Arthur Street. There are year-round residents living there still, some for many years, and they have seen the street scene and local area change radically. Some of those who have reached out to me are very distressed at the prospect of having this development looming behind them, just as residents I spoke with on Forest Road were when the Browns Lane application was approved. This small, hitherto residential area of town is now changing at a rapid pace as more and more PBSA blocks come online. The character of the local area that these people know and love is fast evaporating as speculative PBSA developments take over and dominate the town centre. Please consider this in your deliberations tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to Councillor Corey Losley. Do you wish to respond, Ms Garbutt, to any of the comments?
No, Chair, I'm happy to move to discussion and any further questions that are asked.
Members of the committee, do any of you have any comments or questions? Councillor Fryer.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like clarification, please, from the officer. I'm looking at page 166 in our reports pack, and I note that over the last nearly 50 years, there have been numerous applications for this site, and the last one was for the demolition of garages and the removal of boundary fences, and this was approved. I don't know whether it can be clear on one of the presentation photos, but am I presuming at the moment that the majority of this site is not being used for anything? And that includes, because I noticed there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it affects sort of 7 properties. I would just like clarification that the rear gardens involve X number of houses, but the actual site we're looking at is not being used for anything except nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. For at least a couple of years, the site has been cleared, and it's of no use at the moment. The lawful use will previously have been gardens, but it hasn't been actually in use as gardens for some time.
Do you wish to speak further?
Yes, if I may, thank you for the clarification. So at the moment, we've got a derelict land. If they could bring up also the design, I think it's supposed to be two-storey property. Yes. So from the external, and anybody driving down Frederick Street or walking down Frederick Street, it's a two-storey development, not like we've had before, 3, 4, 5, 6-storey developments. They look sort of architecturally, they look very similar to properties that are in that area already. So I haven't completely made up my mind yet, but or whether I'm going to propose or any proposal. But thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Fryer. Councillor Roberts.
What is concerning about this application, just because something looks like the local housing in your local area, it actually hides, 38 bedrooms, so that'd be 38 people. From that, it doesn't give you any indication that it's student accommodation, whereas we've got some student accommodation that's got lovely landscaping around and high fencing, but it's got a nice sign that says student accommodation. So as a resident or anybody you walk past, you know instantly and you go, and it's usually on the corner of streets, which means that you can see it, whether you're in a car or whatever, you know what it is. Looking at this, it hasn't got any signage, and it might be confusing to some people to see 38 people coming and going in and out of what looks like 4 terraced houses. So we might find ourselves getting into all sorts of interesting complaints about, this new terrace houses that have been built don't actually say that they're actually student accommodation, if that makes sense. So I think that the cumulative effect of this could be quite long lasting. And we've got to be really careful that we don't sort of like put up a little cottage and say, it's lovely, it looks like a little cottage, but inside you find like 150 students.
Do you wish to respond to that, Ms. Garbutt? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. I have concerns about this because there doesn't seem to be a great need for student accommodation in Loughborough. It just seems to be saturated with student accommodation, and it does, because they are a transient population. It does have an effect on the neighbourhood. I think it will cause social harm, and congestion with extra cars, because students do tend to like their cars. So I would be inclined to reject officers' recommendations on this.
Is that a proposal?
Yes, it is. I propose that we reject.
Are there any more comment? Can we have one meeting, please, Councillor Fryer? Councillor Smidovic.
I have quite a few questions. First of all, there's going to be a management plan in place. And I note it's been extended to daytime only from Monday to Saturday, from 9 to 5. Sunday, 9 to 5. Unfortunately, student noise and the drinking and just general partying normally, in my experience, takes place at night. So the students will be happily either studying in the daytime or at the university. So the management will not be aware of the noise they're making in the evening. So that's one concern. I'm also very concerned about the community imbalance. Southfields has the biggest majority of students in properties I think it's nearly 5,000. We have 8,000 around the campus in Loughborough itself, but the predominant areas are Stora and Southfields. So I am concerned about the noise, about the management, and about the continual community imbalance. But also, Frederick Street has now become a major bus route. And what's not been mentioned is it is a rat run. If anything happens on the M1, it either comes down through Ashby Road and into Frederick Street to cut through to the other side of town, as well as Snell's Nook Lane. So there are frequent, when there are accidents elsewhere, that road is entirely jammed. So I do have concerns. The buildings themselves look nice, but however, it will break, I think, number 19 of the purpose-built student accommodation. I think we've now got 19 blocks of student accommodation. So I am concerned about the...
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Infield.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at paragraph 9.6.5, and it's summarising the number of HMOs in the vicinity. So it says there are 106 properties in the vicinity, 43% or over 43% are already HMOs. Now I know we have for Loughborough a policy to limit the density of HMOs, which this already massively exceeds anyway. So a new HMO being proposed anywhere along there would be rejected on those grounds. Why we're not in our own policies able to consider the increased density of students in the area that will come about from a development like this, I'm not sure, because as I understand it, limiting the density of HMOs is to prevent the overwhelming student population in the area and the change in the social characteristics. And this is going to have a massive impact on top of already a massive impact. So I guess we could look to the adverse change to the social character of the area as a material reason to reject planning for this. Can I just clarify with the housing officer that that would be a material consideration that we could use if we decided to go against officers on this?
Ms. Garbutt.
Sorry, can you just repeat the query?
Yeah, this very clear that there'll be a massive density of students, not just from this development, but on top of already a very high density of HMOs, which will be mainly students. Not entirely, of course, and we can't prove that, but mainly students. So my view is there'll be a significant detrimental effect on the social character of the area, which is one of the things that was mentioned in the presentation we heard. So would that be, if we were to go against officer's recommendation, would that be a material planning consideration that we could use as the basis for rejecting this proposal?
Ms. Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. So in short, yes, the detrimental impact on social and physical character and amenity of the local area is a consideration, because that's very clearly stated in policy H8. I think we just need to be a little bit careful about assuming that all the HMOs in the area are student accommodation. HMOs can be used by anybody. They're not necessarily student accommodation. They could be young professionals. They could be single people, whatever. So we can't assume that all the HMOs in the area are students. This development is definitely students and will be restricted to students only. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Councillor Infield.
No, I wasn't. I hope that I made clear that I wasn't assuming they'd all be students, although I think a reasonable assumption is that a very large number of them will be, given Loughborough, and given what we know about the student population in that part of town. But, you know, I'm certainly not assuming they all are, but we would certainly be massively increasing the density of students in an area which I believe already has quite a high density. And as we already heard, we've just approved a massive development just round the corner. So, yeah, cumulative effect, definitely, in my view, a social impact. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Smidovics.
I want to come back on the HMO numbers. We do know that there are other people living in HMOs, but I can guarantee that the number I've given today was when the research was undertaken and the report came out in 2018 for that number of, I think it was then 4,000 some odd. That was actually students. It was only students that were looked at and the numbers clarified. So we knew there were lots more than HMOs, but that was purely on the student numbers. That was what the research was about.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a thought that immediately popped into my mind. Surely the council, Charles Borough Council, must have some information about how many HMOs there are in Loughborough. I can't imagine that that number is not available. And if it is available, we should know that number at the Plans Committee and be able to use that to inform us on making decisions about this sort of development. Thank you.
Ms Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have that information about which properties are HMOs. We don't have the information about the residents of those HMOs. So we can't tell which of those are used by students or a mixture of students and non-students or fully non-students. We don't have that information.
Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, this isn't an HMO. They're individual flats. But we've put the word student there, accommodation. So if it was presented to the Plans Committee as one-bedroom flats and didn't have the tagline of a student on there, it would still be attractive to young people. But of course, the added advantage of marketing that would be that you don't have to pay for management on it. So it's obviously an area that needs development. It's in the centre of a town, a bustling town, a market town. It's an eyesore where it is at the moment. I'm very impressed with the plans here, and I think the front doors here obviously go to 2 flats or 3 flats per front door, and then you've got the other block as well, and the rear of this. And I'm assuming that they're all, I'm looking at it, that they are concrete sills, and they all follow the certain style of looking as though they are terraced houses, especially the ones at the front. So I think we've got to be quite careful here that we're not going to replace one item for something that could come back and just be flats for singles on there that haven't got management. I dare say that people do object to the student accommodation because of the noise. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't live in Loughborough, so I am not aware of all the problems that are created, but I do hear about them. But I still struggle to to work out how this could be rejected on the grounds of it's a student accommodation, not an HMO. I think we could object if it's an HMO because it's reached saturation, but as it's individual student accommodation, I'm not sure. I shall bow to the planners for that.
Ms Garbett, do you have any light to shed on that for Councillor Seaton?
Chair, if I can just interject if I can, just to offer some support without having a coughing fit, hopefully. So apologies earlier, members. Yes, clearly there's some concerns there. We've shared those concerns in the assessment of the application, as you can expect. That's why the officers have put in there, for reference, the quantity of HMO properties in the vicinity. I know member concerns, and those member concerns were expressed in quite an emotive way through the discussion so far, and I appreciate that. Some of the words used were sort of relating to the scale of the development and talking about things being massive. I've seen the site in terms of just pure context, in terms of the physical presence on the site. It is a derelict site at the moment. I don't know whether we can see just the photos of that site, the site at the moment, just for reference. So yeah, fully sort of underutilised. I think there's a parked vehicle on there at times, but it is, for want of a better expression, rough ground. And the scale, as we've just seen with the image that was up there for a while, it is 2-storey, sits in context quite nicely, actually. Dare I say, there's a more recent block we can see in that photograph, which is set back from the frontage, isn't so prominent, but dare I say, with my subjective design eye on the scheme in front of us this evening, probably represents a step up, as you'd expect, being close to the conservation area boundary and more prominent in the street scene. In terms of the scale of the proposal, as was touched on in the discussion earlier, I think we've got 38 flats at the moment, and members, dare I say, before my time and bringing my cough into the proceedings in recent months, the Browns Lane scheme was 167 units. I've just referenced back to that, and many members of the committee will have seen that during the summer months. So this scheme in comparison is about a fifth the size of that, probably very similar to the Ashby Road scheme that we saw perhaps a couple of cycles ago, not a million miles away. This site is centrally located, got access to town centre facilities. People were talking about bus services and other facilities nearby. And it is, in terms of the policy context, there isn't a particular need that has to be demonstrated to provide a successful outcome in planning terms. And in terms of that community imbalance and the social area of things, and things like security, I noticed the police have made comments about various elements, whether that be CCTV, entry systems, management. And I think those are areas that officers have sought to, with the applicant, sought to address and are conditioned as part of the recommendation this evening. So we certainly are mindful of the concerns that members have expressed this evening, but in planning terms and in the assessment, in the detailed assessment, I feel we've got a scheme that provides an appropriate reuse of a derelict site at the moment, and there are management controls, including the updates from Ms Garbett this evening, to control appropriately and reasonably in planning terms, as well as the clarification on the use of the property for a sui generis student accommodation use, that hopefully will provide sufficient confidence that the relevant issues have been looked at and a positive recommendation can be supported. Thank you, Chair.
Any further comments? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. I've no objection to the site being developed. I think that would be a good idea. But for, for something more appropriate than student accommodation, which is already, as I said, quite concentrated in the area. But it is the fact that it's for students who are a transient population, and that will cause social or societal harm to the area. And it's purely that on which I object to this application. The actual building is the design is great. Yeah, all that's fine. The development, no objection to the principle of development, just that it's student accommodation in an area already saturated with student accommodation.
Councillor Infield.
Yes, I think a lot of us will agree with that. I mean, it's quite an attractive looking development on what is at present wasteland and does need to be utilised. So that got me thinking, you know, it's been put forward as student accommodation, purpose-built student accommodation, and that's the business case, no doubt, that the developers, the landowners have in mind. But given that if they'd come with a proposal for independent flats for first-time buyers, for which there's a shortage in the town, could we not defer the decision and ask the developers to come back with a reworking of the use? It wouldn't require a huge amount of work as far as I can see, because they've laid it out in a way that would lend itself to individual flats. And the design, I think most of us are quite impressed with. And it's consistent with the conservation area that it abuts. Would that be something that we could do?
Ms Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. We've got to look at the application that's in front of us and determine the application that's in front of us, which is for purpose-built student accommodation. I would also say that if it were to be general housing, you would be looking at different amenity impacts and different parking highways impacts. So if it were to be flats or individual dwellings, you would be expecting garden areas, and you'd also be expecting a level of parking over and above what's provided on this site as well. So there would be very different impacts on the different proposal.
Mr Evans, did you wish to comment?
No, I was just going to say what Ms Garbett said.
Okay. Councillor Seaton.
And of course, it's the financial implications. We've just assumed that the flats would be bought to sell. These obviously have an annual financial input, and that is what a developer is looking for. At the annual input there of new students without having to provide car parking spaces and the small gardens. So the chances of it being commuted to individual flats is very remote.
So I've got a proposal, but I can't remember whether it was Councillor Infield or Councillor Palmer that put it. Thank you. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Are there any other comments or questions that members want to make before we proceed any further?
Chair. I think it's important, Chair, that we have two proposals now. I think we need to understand if the members are going to vote on it, what the reasons for refusal would be. That's really important.
Can we have some reasons?
I thought it was agreed that the cumulative adverse social impact of so much student so many students in a small area would be a material planning consideration that we can use to reject the proposal.
I've been reading most of the morning actually about purpose-built student accommodation, and apparently in an area like Loughborough where you have to have additional licensing or selective licensing for HMOs for private sector purpose-built student accommodation. As we're already saturated in this area with 43% student accommodation already, would that be a consideration on material planning ground?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm glad you mentioned two things there. One is around HMOs, which we've talked about this evening. Another one is the word saturation. Because in moving, I think this was where Mr. Evans was coming from as well, in terms of having a reason for refusal. It has to be reasonable and to be robust. It has to have a fairly good evidential basis for it as well. And I think it can be quite emotive, can't it? Some of the words, saturation is another one that's oft used. But we have to look at what are the actual planning implications. I know there's reference earlier to the numbers in terms of 38 students and having 38 students coming in and out, giving an impression in some ways of, a snake of students coming in and out, all 38 people from all 38 flats. To my mind, we've got, as I tried to express by looking at the recent examples in the local area, a relatively modest proposal. We have no clear evidence to my mind, nobody's expressed that this evening, and I'm not aware of any through the assessment and reporting that officers have made, of justifying the phraseology of saturation and any consequent harms that would cause. I think there's clearly a fear of consequences, perhaps from previous experiences of this type of development. And I think the comments from the police in the published report sets out some concerns, but also sets out some things that we need to be mindful of, as I referenced earlier, with regard to CCTV, management of the site, entry systems and what have you. I think those are adequately covered in planning terms in the recommendation this evening. And I would just caution members to have some clear ideas when they make reference to reasons for refusal, that they can be clearly evidenced. And that's why, the recommendation as it is this evening, because in planning terms we feel that I wasn't just talking about the physical characteristics of the building earlier, I was trying to give a rounded picture referencing police liaison and different comments that we've had on the application. It's town centre location, that it is appropriate, and it's just with that caution, if members were minded not to look at this in a positive light. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Smidovic.
Would residential amenity cover what Mr. Upton has outlined as a material consideration?
Mr. Upton.
Clearly, residential amenities are an oft-used material consideration, but again, in this circumstance, we've seen how the site is proposed to be set up in terms of 2 blocks of accommodation with an access amenity areas, bicycle storage, so it's got all the services for normal day-to-day living, whether that's students or any other element of the population. So there's nothing that strikes me in terms of the way the site is set up in that town centre location that would give me overt concerns with regard to residential amenity. That's not to say that things can't happen in due course. You can't sit here and gainsay precisely what might happen. It depends, as in all types of accommodation, what character any person has. But yeah, in terms of planning for that particular site and in that particular area, that's why we've got the recommendation this evening and reference to no overly concerning areas for planning officers regarding residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Upton. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm doubtful about the need for this, to be honest. I'm also very doubtful that about there won't be any positive impacts in terms of the people who live round the corner from it, for all the reasons that we've talked about at this meeting and previous meetings. But because we haven't got information, hard facts, numbers, the question I asked earlier, how many HMOs are there, how many of the, because we haven't got that hard information, up-to-date information, it's very difficult for us to reject this on grounds of policy H8, because we can't justify taking that decision because we haven't got the hard information, as Mr Upton pointed out. We need hard information in order to justify that decision. We haven't got it, unfortunately. I hope in the very near future the council will collect that information so that when these things come to the committee, we can say, well, actually, there's so many of these and so many of those and so many, and we can actually make a decision based on some evidence rather than our gut instinct. Thank you.
Just one thing I should have clarified earlier, Chair, in terms of need. There's no particular need that needs to be demonstrated with assessing the proposal on its merits. And there is some information in the report in terms of HMOs, so we have tried to guide members along the way, but clearly I understand, in terms of the purpose-built student accommodation is different, but there isn't a particular requirement in that policy basis to express need. But there are conditions, as I was trying to elucidate earlier, regarding CCTV, external lighting, parking, management generally, the control over the use, which is in the extras report, which is very clear in terms of proposed condition number 31 regarding the sui generis use, and also the on-site manager, which we've reflected on even following the published report and extended from 5 days to 7 days a week. And that is in response to both local comment, police comment, and our further observations from the site. So hopefully, Chair and Councillors, that helps you with moving forward with the proposal. Thank you.
Our proposal at the moment then, unless anybody else has got any comments. Councillor Fryer. Do you wish to make a comment?
The officer has clarified a number of points for me.
Thank you. So the proposal is that we go against officer's recommendation and refuse permission for this.
Do we actually know what we're going to refuse it on, Chair? I still haven't. I'm sorry, Chair. Through you, Chair. I think we still. If I was a member at the moment in planning committee, I wouldn't actually fully understand what I was actually voting for. So I think we just need to understand, if we are going to refuse the application, what the basis for that will be.
I believe Councillor Infield filled us in on that, didn't you? Could you repeat it for us, please?
Well, it was on the negative impact on the social characteristics of the area that this further student housing development would, on top of one in particular, one that we've already granted for the same area, would have in this part of town.
So that was the reason for the proposal to refuse, and it was seconded. Do you want to speak again, Councillor Palmer? Okay. So all those in favour of refusing permission on this application against officer's recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry again, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7. All those against refusal?
2.
No abstentions?
Chair. Chair, can I confirm that the motion was carried for refusal?
Thank you. Hold on, I ain't finished yet. Oh, sorry, Councillor Roberts.
Because I thought we were refusing on the fact that we already had 43% student accommodation within that ward, and hence the accumulative effect and
It's
H8.
HMOs. It's not HMOs, not student accommodation, but private purpose-built student accommodation is considered to be a special HMO for Loughborough.
Oh, same thing, same difference.
There are no other. There are no other items on the agenda, so I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas.